All right, so I'll start here. Ariel mentioned ransomware, and Max earlier mentioned ransomware, the types of attacks that are going on. Why are these attacks happening? And part of the reason why they're happening is there's a ton of money behind them. But over the last maybe 4 or 5 years or so, there's been a strategy change. It's no longer about the money, but now hacktivists are actually getting engaged there, and they're doing this for political motives. Around, I would say, October, November of last year, this small hacktivist group impacted Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, and a lot of the Latin American companies. And some would even say that they came as far as the Caribbean as well to try to get political power out of this. For better or for worse, I don't know if the Mexican government handled it properly, but I kind of like the guy. The guy, he said, "Oh, it never happened." Oh, lies, man. All of his data was published out on the web, but he denied that anything happened there. The reason why I think it's actually cool that he did that is he deflated the entire incident probably over the course of 2 weeks. Yeah, they lost the data. Once the data is lost, you can't get it back. Why are people stuck on that? They can afford to say this never happened, but down on this level, we have to actually deal with the consequences. But the point of all of this is data breaches are happening all the time. And just to demystify how these data breaches happen, I think I clicked on forward. This is an example of how a data breach, or even more importantly, a ransomware attack happens. User opens up a Word document. Document is empty, and all sorts of things start to happen. All sorts of things happen. You're actually going to see towards the end of this that all of the documents are become encrypted. I think there it goes. All of the documents become encrypted, all with a simple fact of a user opening up a document. Now, what does this have to do with data privacy? With the intent of the bad guys moving from trying to extort money out of an agency to injecting political motives in there. The target is no longer the money. The target is now the data that is inside those systems and what they can do with that data. Max mentioned extortion during his insurance talk. People get extorted 3 different ways. One of those is pay the bad guy to get your data back. The second way that they get extorted is you pay them not to release your data. And then whether you choose to pay to get your data back or pay them not to release your data, what prevents them from selling that data that they've already bought? Absolutely nothing. So most people are going to get infected, or not infected, but extorted 3 different ways. So with all of that being said, what is worse than a ransomware attack? And I put some misleading questions here, but some of the common things that come up is who manages communication? How do we manage communication? DPA says we need to disclose this, but when do you disclose it? Do you do it before? Do you do it after, et cetera? Somewhere the C-level folks want to know, how did this attack happen? How do you get your data back? And all of those questions are going on inside of the head of the people that are trying to respond. But what is actually going on is we are building and burning time. The worst part of a ransomware attack is the time that is being lost while we try to figure out exactly what's going on. Now, why do I say that that's the worst part? In probably the first 3 minutes after an attack runs, you end up with an event like this, data loss. So data is encrypted. Within the first couple of minutes as the attack is happening, all of this data that the user had access to has already been taken out of the organization, and somebody has it over there. And now they can do the triple extortion piece all the time out there. It's gone from something that you hear of maybe every once in a while to something happens just about every week or so. Ransomware events are continually going. Data loss events are always happening out there. But the reason why I mention that is, how are these events still happening? Ariel mentioned, we're being empowered to do this. And as a vendor, I have to take fault for this. I never do this, but I have heard of some vendors that will show up and say, hey, we're going to sell you a Death Star. This Death Star is absolutely the best thing that can happen out there. And this is the picture that gets painted. You're going to receive this shiny object that's going to stop every single thing that's out there. But in reality, what that vendor has sold you is this. Not as sexy, but it still does what it's supposed to do. And we all accept, yeah, this will still work. But when it gets really, really bad, is when what they actually deliver is this. Now, it's all the nuts and the bolts. It's every single thing that they said they would give us, but who's going to do the work? Somebody has to go both all of those things together. And eventually, a year from now, there's that time thing again, that Death Star is going to be in the center stage, in what the picture in the middle looks like it's supposed to be doing. And we all live with it, we deal with it. Now, most of these attacks cause a couple of challenges that those people that are building all the Lego pieces together are trying to solve. One of those is, since we live in this huge ecosystem, we have to learn to get over the vendor-itis and just make the technologies work together. So you folks have to work in a multi-vendor environment. Every vendor calls this gray shirt, a purple shirt, a blue shirt, this shirt, what shirt, they don't know what it is, but we all have to piece together the different languages that are out there. Bigger problem is that the different languages that different vendors speak, the languages don't actually match. So you spend a lot of time manually building all of those bridges to be able to have system A talk to system B. That burns time. But wait, there's a solution. Why don't we build this SIM in the middle? And the SIM absorbs all of the data that's going on, and then somebody has to go into the SIM and find this data that I'm looking for. Ariel again mentioned the following the person. That's a lot of data that needs to get analyzed somewhere. That data is stored in a SIM or can be stored in a SIM, but who's going to be doing the analysis of that data to find that anomalous data tip that's out there? Ariel has a solution for that. He can talk about a little bit more on that. But we all get overloaded with data. And as you start to see all of this data come in, you lose focus of what's really important. I never understood that whole saying of, you get lost, you lose the tree by staring at the forest or something like that. It's kind of the other way around. You're inundated with the forest to where you ignore the tree that's right in the middle of you. So much data that you start losing focus of what's really going on out there. And these are some of the challenges that security teams out there now are facing. Now, I mention all of this because there's a good reason why this is going on. And it all goes back over to the different vendors, the different vendor strategy that's needed out there. And it creates this huge burden on the manual resources to actually build all of that stuff together. Manual resources equates to time being lost. Manual processes reacting to an event generates that opportunity window for the bad guys to make a small hole in a wall and extort tons and tons of data from there. But good news is there's progress on all of the parts out there. One of the common themes that I've seen here is the need to create a security ecosystem where all of the vendors out there are talking to each other. I was debating on whether or not to have the slide on the screen, but Max convinced me when I saw he mentioned EDR in his presentation. EDR is a good thing to have, but EDR implies data. Who's going to manage the data? Who's going to analyze the data? Who's going to do all of that manual work that's there? Norton, McAfee, Sophos, back in those days, technologies have changed a lot. But back in those days, back when I had hair, they focused on detecting a file. A file would come on in, it proved itself to be bad. From this point forward, this file will be bad. And AV technology, signature-based technology, worked phenomenally well. It actually got moved over into content filtering for emails, gave birth to the data loss prevention solutions via email and web to a certain extent. But the bad guys figured out that rather than creating new malware, why don't I just inject a character to the end of my file? Totally new signature. I've defeated antivirus. And it gave birth to the need to generate a new type of technology. And that's what we see on the lower left-hand side. It's the next generation antivirus technology. But what is NGAV? NGAV is a smart analysis system that looks at the content of a file, and it finds statistical patterns in the file to say, I've seen this before or not. Huge improvement. It gets rid of the need to have a one-for-one matching on viruses. Let's look for the bad content and trigger off of that. That had a dependency on the need to recognize a file before in order for it to be identified as malicious. But if it's a zero-day threat, there's nothing to key off of. Bad guys had an incredible way to go in just by creating a brand new virus out there. That change in funding for the bad guys gave birth to the huge huge malware marketplace. Download your malware of the day and off you go from there. That created the next evolution, which is the EDR evolution, endpoint detection and response. It monitors what's going on the endpoint and or server. But simplifying it so that I can understand, an EDR system is a recording mechanism that runs on every system. And it records the data and sends it somewhere to be analyzed. But that time thing that we're talking about, at what point in time does that EDR system say something bad happened? Does it do it before the bad thing happened, during the bad thing happening, or after the bad thing happening? If you take a step back and you think about what EDR is, EDR has to record that something bad happened, in order for it to know that something bad has happened. So the short answer is EDR systems will typically trigger after the bad thing has happened. Time is not our friend. So how do we solve this? That gave birth to the next evolution, which is this whole XDR thing. And XDR opens up the ecosystem to injecting data from other systems that are out there and analyzing that data in as close to real time as possible. XDR is something that I strongly recommend anybody take a look at, because we have tons of data already within our own ecosystems. Let's centralize it somewhere and let's work off of it there. Now, I do have a couple of recommendations on how we can solve this problem. We talked about data, we talked about XDR. Not all data is valuable, at least not to me. But any XDR system or any privacy system or any security system has to have usable data. What I mean by usable data is the data that we're looking at needs to be the right data, and that data needs to be ingested and used by the right systems. Because if I take my mobile device logs and I feed them to my car doesn't care what happened over here. But a security system might care about data coming from my car, my mobile device, and different things out there. So whatever system you take a look at to protect your data, your privacy, have it be usable. Develop an ecosystem that can use as much data as needed and come up with decisions in real time. I don't like this, but there are some vendors who put on their blinders and say, I will only talk to this vendor here. That doesn't create an open ecosystem there. Openness is our friend to be able to win against the bad guys. Brings us over to the next suggestion, and this is all from our interfaces here. It's a little difficult to see, but we recommend that any system you look at have open APIs to be able to exchange data in real time. And I did this for Ariel on purpose, but on the far right-hand side of the screen, you can actually see the SentinelOne system talking to the Zscaler system in real time. What does that mean? Dave mentioned that the endpoint is where everything happens. If we detect something starting to happen and we have a very good certainty that it's bad, well, why let it continue on the endpoint? And even worse, why allow that system to be on the network? The open platform kicks in and automatically starts workflow on other devices. Maybe we tell Zscaler, hey, knock that user off. Maybe we tell Active Directory, disable that account. It's all there, trying to automate the work so that you don't have to do. Minimize the time that is going on between the attacker started something to when action is being taken. Also, you want to correlate data in real time. This is from the console itself. It's hard to see, but the items in purple are different IOCs that are being generated, not identified, but these are generated. We've detected a sequence of events. We know that this is bad. We map them over to MITRE, and we generate all of this data in one console. And we present it to the analyst saying, hey, this just happened. And this is everything that we did. To protect your data, you need real-time ability to analyze behaviors and take an action on them. And I think that's what this one says here, automated response. Only one more slide and then I'll get out of here. Automated response means I know something just happened. I'm doing this sort of stuff, not only on the endpoint, but let's tell the rest of the network you need to do something there as well. And then focusing on the automated actions within the endpoint. If I saw the attacker try to manipulate data in this way and try to get to a point to where they're going to do something, well, we know everything they've done up until this point, stop the attack from happening, undo the damage that happened on the system, and close the case out there. And I think that is it.